She declared war on my fence for community harmony. But nature had other plans. The morning I discovered my fence was gone, a chilling thought stalked me. Had I, in some bizarre sleepwalking trance, taken a chainsaw to my own property? Just the night before, a formidable cedar barrier, its posts sunk deep enough to withstand a gale, had proudly stood. Now, only a pathetic line of splintered stumps remained, like broken teeth in a gaping maw. Before I could even fully wipe the sleep from my eyes, she appeared, the self-proclaimed monarch of our cul-de-sac, gliding across my lawn in a rose-patterned bathrobe. It was Brenda, our HOA board president. She brandished her ceramic mug like a law enforcement badge. "Property lines must remain open," she declared, steam rising from her cup, and quite literally, from my own ears. I wanted to scream, but that's just not my way. Instead, I leaned against my porch railing, observing her as if she were auditioning for a new reality show. "How amusing," I drawled. "I don't recall signing up for a neighborhood petting zoo. Did the HOA add that little gem after I stopped sifting through your endless emails about mailbox color?" Her lips tightened so severely, I feared they might actually disappear. Brenda, you see, lived for control. She believed a bush too tall was a moral failing, and enforcing rules, that was her personal domain. Her convoluted explanation, fences, she claimed, disrupted neighborhood serenity and created barriers to connection. Never mind that my fence had stood for years without a single complaint. And never mind that my property tax records clearly delineated the very boundaries she now insisted be kept open. When I dared to ask for official documentation authorizing her to destroy my property, she merely smirked, announcing the vote was unanimous. Later I'd uncover the truth. Her unanimous vote was just her and her crony, Stacy, scribbling on cocktail napkins during a wine night. I didn't bother raising my voice. People like Brenda thrive on conflict. Outrage is their oxygen. But I did notice the telltale orange streaks on the broken wood. Someone had marked them deliberately. This wasn't just Brenda with her gardening shears. This was a calculated attack, likely orchestrated with her cousin, whose discount contracting business was infamous for doing HOA dirty work. This wasn't some neighborhood consensus. It was deeply personal. What Brenda hadn't grasped, and what I certainly wasn't about to enlighten her on, was the fence's true purpose. My home sat at the edge of town, where manicured lawns gave way to wild, untamed wood. Deer frequently wandered through, and coyotes stalked the shadows at night. The fence was my defense, protecting my tomato plants, and keeping my dogs safe from chasing after them. Its removal had created a gaping chasm between Brenda's pristine koi pond and the untamed wilderness beyond. But trying to explain that to her would be like telling a toddler not to touch a hot stove. She'd only be more determined to burn herself. That morning, as Brenda pranced back to her driveway, humming a tune of victory, I walked my property line. I found a broken board, marked not by a hammer, but by fresh claw marks. Something had been trying to climb or push through. The fence had done its job until Brenda's little crusade tore it down. Just 2 days later, our neighborhood Facebook group erupted with her post. Initially it was a smug photo of her yard, triumphantly captioned, "Finally open and welcoming, just how a community should be." Then the tone abruptly shifted. "Did anyone else hear strange noises last night, like growling or just raccoon?" A shaky, grainy video followed, showing her overturned trash cans, their contents scattered and shredded. She tagged it "wildlife issues." Meanwhile, Stacy piped up with comments like, "Don't worry, Brenda, the HOA will handle this. We'll set humane trap," which was utterly hilarious considering Stacy once tried to humanely trap squirrels by spraying them with peppermint oil and singing hymns. The comment thread exploded with neighbors debating whether coyotes or feral dogs were the culprits. I remained silent. Sometimes silence speaks volumes louder than any shout. By the weekend, the HOA called an emergency meeting in Brenda's driveway. Folding chairs were meticulously arranged, her koi pond gurgling like a serene soundtrack. She stood at the head, a clipboard clutched like a ceremonial sword. "Neighbors," she began, her voice grave, "we face a crisis of safety. The removal of fences has led to unforeseen consequences. Something is moving through our yards at night." She paused dramatically, scanning every face. Not a single person dared to mention the obvious, that she herself had ordered the fences gone. When it was my turn to speak, I kept my voice perfectly calm. "How strange," I remarked. "My yard was perfectly fine, until someone deliberately destroyed a structure I paid for. But I'm sure the HOA will cover the replacement costs, right?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Brenda's lips thinned, and she artfully dodged the question, insisting the community needed unity and cooperation. Translation: she absolutely refused to be held financially responsible. That night I sat on my porch with a flashlight, listening. Around midnight, I heard it. Heavy, deliberate steps, not the frantic scurry of raccoons, nor the sharp yips of coyotes, something much, much larger. My dog let out a low, guttural growl. The sound of snuffling drifted through the night, followed by the metallic clang of a trash lid. I didn't move. I didn't shout. I simply watched a dark silhouette lumbering towards Brenda's yard. Broad shoulders, rounded ears, a massive shape moving with an almost lazy power. By morning, the neighborhood group chat had detonated again. Brenda's post, in all caps. "A bear was in my yard. It ate my KOI. This is a public safety emergency." She attached blurry photos that looked like a Bigfoot sighting, but the mangled pond and shredded bags told the true, horrifying tale. Stacy commented, "We need to call animal control ASAP." Then a quieter voice in the thread asked, "Didn't Ethan warn us about wildlife before?" That comment vanished mysteriously within minutes. I didn't say a public word, but privately I couldn't suppress the smile that spread across my face. Brenda had torn down my fence to make the neighborhood more open. Well, now the wilderness was open too, and it had walked right through the very gap she had created, and that, I realized, was just the beginning. The morning after Brenda's Koi massacre, I found a bright orange notice taped to my front door. In stark block letters, it screamed, "Community code violation, failure to maintain safe property boundaries." I burst out laughing, leaning against the door. They had removed my fence, and now I was being cited for its absence. That's Brenda's twisted logic. Destroy something you own, then fine you for not having it. I tucked the notice into my pocket like a bizarre souvenir and headed to my mailbox, where I bumped into my neighbor Mike. He's the kind of guy who wears socks with sandals and possesses a doctorate in everyone else's business. "Rough luck with the notice," he said, a smirk playing on his lips. "Brenda's on the warpath. Says you invited the bear by leaving your yard too welcoming." I tilted my head. "Invite Mike? The only thing my yard invites these days are mosquitoes. The bear came because Brenda decided my fence was an eyesore. Now she's offering free wildlife tours, no admission fee." Mike chuckled, then lowered his voice. "Careful, man. She's pushing for a special HOA rule that would make you financially responsible for any damage the bear causes, even if it's not on your property." That stopped me cold. My stomach clenched, not with fear but with white-hot fury. Brenda wasn't just asserting control now. She was weaponizing bureaucracy to bankrupt me. My previous silence and sarcasm had been amusing, but it was time to think several steps ahead. I began meticulously documenting everything: photos of the broken boards with timestamps, screenshots of Brenda's smug Facebook posts, boasting about her fence demolition, even audio recordings of the HOA meetings on my phone. Every self-satisfied word she'd uttered about open yards was now safely stored in my growing digital archive. If Brenda wanted a legal battle, I would be the one dropping evidence bombs. That evening, animal control vehicles rolled into our cul-de-sac. Two officers, in khaki uniforms, unloaded a steel trap the size of a small car. The neighborhood gathered, murmuring, like spectators at a strange parade. Kids perched on their bikes. Parents whispered nervously. Brenda hovered in her gardening gloves, barking orders as if she'd deputized herself. "This is unacceptable," she shrieked. "That bear is a menace, and we must eliminate the source." She whirled, gesturing dramatically toward me, head swiveled in my direction, as if I were about to be publicly shamed. I casually raised my hand. "Eliminate the source? You mean the wood? Or perhaps your koi pond, which smells suspiciously like a buffet line?" A ripple of suppressed laughter swept through the crowd. Brenda's face stiffened, her cheeks blotching crimson. The officers, unfazed by her theatrics, calmly set the trap at the edge of the woods, baiting it with a hunk of fish. Brenda, however, remained unsatisfied. That night, clipboard in hand, She marched door to door demanding signatures on a petition, her grand scheme to force me to pay for a community security fence around her property. She arrived at my door last, not even bothering with a greeting. "This is your responsibility," she snapped, shoving the clipboard at me. "If you'd kept your yard safe, none of this would have happened." I kept my voice calm, measured. "Brenda, my yard was safe. You tore down the very thing that kept it safe, and now you expect me to buy you a new fence? That's like breaking into someone's car, ripping out the airbags, then sending them a bill for whiplash." She jabbed her pen against the paper. "Do you want to be known as the neighbor who brought predators to our children's doorsteps?" I offered a thin smile. "Brenda, I don't need to sign anything to already be known as the neighbor who minds his own business. Perhaps you should try it sometime." Then I quietly closed the door. The very next day, the bear returned. This time, koi didn't satisfy its appetite. It lumbered directly across Brenda's open lawn, toppled her bird feeder like a toy, and pawed through her herb garden. Neighbors watched from their windows, phones recording as Brenda shrieked from her deck, banging pots together. The bear didn't even flinch. In fact, it lifted its massive head, gazed directly at her, and settled down as if her meltdown were dinner theater. Within the hour, the videos had gone viral in our town group chat. Brenda wasn't just the HOA queen anymore. She was the punchline of Bear Watch 20. Someone even created a meme, "Brenda frozen in terror," captioned, "HOA hugging our apex predator." When she realized I hadn't posted or commented, she cornered me at the mailboxes. Her eyes were wild, her voice a furious hiss. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I tilted my head. "Enjoying what? My demolished fence? My orange violation notice? Or the fact that your personal crusade has become public comedy gold?" She jabbed her finger at me. "This is sabotage. You're deliberately not helping." That almost made me laugh out loud. "Brenda, how exactly do you expect me to help? Wrestle the bear? Offer it a lease agreement?" Her fury reached a boiling point. She threatened to sue me directly. "If my property value drops, I'll see you in court," she spat. "I'll make sure you pay for every single penny." That night, I meticulously prepared a packet. Photos, recordings, screenshots, timestamps, all bundled and backed up on a cloud drive. A lawyer friend of mine, the kind who relishes deflating HOA egos, received the file with a simple note: "Potential client, Exhibit A, 1 unhinged board president, 1 demolished fence, 1 very large bear." My lawyer called me the next morning, practically giddy. "Ethan, this is airtight. If she pushes you to court, she won't just lose, she'll end up covering your damages." Meanwhile, the neighborhood's patience with Brenda was rapidly eroding. The same parents who had once lauded her vigilance were now fuming that their children couldn't play outside. Stacy had quietly deleted her old Facebook posts, no longer defending her. Even Mike muttered to me, "Man, I didn't sign up for a nature documentary in my driveway." The pressure mounted. Brenda, however, only dug in deep. She attempted to call another emergency meeting, but only 4 people bothered to show up. She printed flyers demanding action against unsafe residents and taped them to light poles, but neighborhood kids gleefully tore them down and fashioned them into paper airplanes. Then at 2:01 Thursday, it happened. Brenda called animal control in a fit of hysterics, claiming the bear was trapped in her garage. By the time officers arrived, the entire cul-de-sac was awake, standing in pajamas and slippers, whispering nervously. Sure enough, the garage door had been left ajar. A bag of bird seeds lay spilled across the floor, and there, snuffling contentedly in the corner, was the bear. I'll never forget Brenda's face as the officers coaxed it out, pale, trembling, a grotesque mixture of terror and humiliation. Cameras were rolling again, and this time, even the local news had arrived. By dawn, the headlines screamed, "HOA President's Open Yard Policy Leads to Bear Break-In." The footage showed her wringing her hands, muttering pathetic excuses, as the bear was safely caged. My lawyer texted me a screenshot, with a single word, "For the first time in weeks." I knew the tide had decisively turned. The morning after the bear incident in Brenda's garage, I woke to the familiar hum of lawnmowers. Initially I thought it was just the usual landscaping crew, but as I stepped outside with my coffee, I nearly choked. Brenda had hired 3 men in neon vests, to chop down the small trees lining the back of my property. These weren't even on HOA common land. They were firmly on my land. Stumps smoked where the chainsaws had just been. Wood chips scattered across my grass like confetti after a crime scene. I walked over slowly, because that's the secret to dealing with power-hungry bullies. They expect you to explode. They thrive on your outrage. The calmer you remain, the more it unnerves them. Brenda, of course, was there, in her floppy sun hat and oversized sunglasses, barking orders like a deranged foreman. Those need to come down too, she instructed one worker, pointing towards a cluster of saplings near my dog's run. I took a slow sip of coffee. Funny, I said. I don't recall issuing a demolition permit for my yard. Brenda spun around, her lips tight, eyes hidden behind her dark lenses, but her fury palpable. These are unsafe, she declared. They provide cover for dangerous animals. The board agreed. It's best to remove them. I raised an eyebrow. The board? You mean you, Stacy, and Mike's half-hearted nods? She bristled. As president, I have the authority to protect the neighborhood. I nodded slowly, deliberately. And as the property owner, I have the authority to call the sheriff. Her smirk flickered for a half second. The sheriff won't care. This is a civil matter. I calmly set my mug down on the fence post. Well, the stump of what used to be the fence post, and pulled out my phone. You're right, I said. The sheriff won't care about HOA drama, but he will care about criminal trespassing and destruction of private property. I lifted the phone so she could see the small red light blinking. I had been recording our entire exchange. The workers froze. One muttered, "Ma'am, maybe we should leave this to the lawyers," and started packing up. Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Finally she shrieked, "This isn't over," before storming off, her sun hat bobbing with each furious stride. For that moment, it was over. The workers peeled out in their truck, leaving my yard littered with stumps and sawdust. I snapped photos, time-stamped them, and filed them away in my ever-growing evidence folder. My lawyer was going to absolutely love this. By afternoon, the story had spread like wildfire again. It turned out one of the workers lived 2 streets over, and told his wife everything. Within hours, the neighborhood group chat was ablaze. Did Brenda seriously try to chop down Ethan's trees? Isn't that illegal? Does she think she owns the entire subdivision? Someone even dug up the county's property maps and posted them with a large red circle around my lot. The consensus was clear. Brenda had crossed a line, and not just with her chainsaw crew. But Brenda wasn't finished. She never admitted defeat. She only escalated. That evening, a flyer appeared on every doorstep. Community Safety Initiative. It declared in bold, its gist being that she was pushing for a new mandatory neighborhood watch, with hefty fines for any homeowner whose yard attracted wildlife. According to her, I was ground zero for the bear crisis, and unless I agreed to let the HOA control environmental conditions on my property, I'd face severe penalties. I didn't even bother responding. I knew exactly how to play this. That night, I emailed my lawyer the new flyer, along with photos of the chopped trees and recordings of our conversation. He called me back immediately, almost gleeful. "Ethan," he crowed, "she's handing you the case on a silver platter. Harassment, destruction of property, defamation, you name it. If she keeps this up, not only will you be cleared, but you might end up with her paying your legal fees and damages." The next twist came faster than even I anticipated. 2 nights later, another bear appeared. Not the same one. They'd tagged the first before relocating it. This one was larger, darker, moving with the heavy certainty of an animal that had been here before. It ambled straight across the street, bypassed my yard entirely, and padded directly into Brenda's. I watched from my porch as motion lights flickered on. The bear lumbered right up to her garage door, the very one she'd left open before, and swiped at it with a paw. This time, Brenda screamed so loudly, I heard it 3 houses away. Lights flickered on across the cul-de-sac. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Someone shouted, "Call the cops." The bear, utterly unbothered, dragged one of her patio cushions into the yard and shredded it like a toy. Animal control arrived again, but this time their tone was markedly different. I overheard one officer telling her firmly, "Ma'am, you simply cannot keep leaving attractants out. Birdseed, koi, Unsecured trash. It draws them in. Brenda, in a full-blown meltdown, jabbed her finger towards my house. It's his fault. He's encouraging them. The officer glanced at my yard. Bare. Clean. No food. No garbage. No damage. Then back at Brenda's. The overturned koi pond. Scattered trash bins. Herb gardens strewn everywhere. His silence spoke volumes. The next morning, the video hit the news again. The clip of Brenda, shrieking while the bear gleefully dismantled her cushion, went viral, complete with slow-motion replays and sarcastic captions. Open yards. Open buffet. Brenda versus nature. Round. Even the local paper ran a headline. HOA leader blames neighbor for bear. Forgets she owns koi buffet. By now the tide wasn't just turning. It was a full-blown tsunami. Neighbors who had once feared her fines began whispering openly about removing her from the HOA board. Someone even slipped a note into my mailbox. If you start a petition, I'll sign it. Brenda wasn't about to go quietly. That week, she filed a formal complaint with the county, accusing me of negligent property management. It was a ridiculous claim, but it forced an inspection. 2 officials showed up, clipboards in hand. Brenda shadowed them, like a proud prosecutor, pointing out every stray leaf on my lawn, every dandelion. The officials spent 10 minutes walking my property, then a full 30 minutes inspecting hers. When they finished, one cleared his throat. Ma'am, your yard is the issue here. The pond, the unsecured feed, the open trash, these are all bear attractants. Brenda's jaw nearly unhinged. She sputtered pathetic excuses, but the officials simply handed her a written warning and departed. That night, her porch light remained off. No Facebook posts. No flyers. For the first time, Brenda seemed rattled, not defeated, perhaps, but certainly rattled, which for her was practically a crack in her armor. I sat on my porch, sipping a cold beer, my dog dozing contentedly at my feet. The cicadas hummed softly. Somewhere in the distance, I thought I heard a low growl. For once it wasn't a sound that filled me with dread, because I had finally understood. I didn't have to fight Brenda directly. Nature was doing the work for me. Every swing she took only dug her deeper into her own hole. Every rule she tried to twist snapped back against her. All I had to do was document, remain calm, and let her self-destruct. And she was only just beginning. 3 days after county officials slapped Brenda with that written warning, the neighborhood entered an eerie silence. For the first time since this war began, she wasn't storming around with clipboards or posting all-caps manifestos. No flyers taped to lampposts. No more furious Facebook rants about predators. It was unsettling, like the calm before a hurricane. I knew Brenda too well. Silence wasn't surrender. It was a new strategy. I didn't have to wait long to see her next move. Saturday morning, a convoy of SUVs rolled up to her driveway. 3 men in crisp polos, embroidered with the HOA's logo, stepped out. Brenda strutted out behind them, like a general leading her army, clutching a binder so thick, it looked like it contained every disastrous decision she'd ever made. The men set up a folding table, clipboards, even a microphone. Within half an hour, she had transformed her driveway into what looked suspiciously like a courtroom. I wandered over with my coffee, curious. Neighbors trickled in too, whispering as they settled into the folding chair. Brenda tapped the microphone and grandly declared, "This is a special disciplinary hearing of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association." She savored every word, luxuriating in her authority. "The subject is Mr. Ethan, whose negligence and hostility have endangered our community." A ripple of unease spread through the crowd. People shifted uncomfortably. Even Stacy, her loyal second in command, kept her eyes glued to her lap. Brenda flipped her binder open with a floor. She had printed copies of every Facebook argument, every doctored photo, even a fabricated graph showing bear sightings, increasing since I had installed my fence years ago. Never mind that the sightings had only begun after she tore it down. I let her ramble. That's the trick with people like Brenda. Give them enough rope, and they'll weave their own noose. She recited fake statistics, waved photos dramatically, and branded me a threat to neighborhood harmony. When she finally slammed the binder shut,
She turned to the crowd. I motioned to fine Ethan $5,000 for negligence and demand the removal of all vegetation on his property that could harbor predators. The silence was deafening. Everyone looked at me. I calmly set my coffee down, stood slowly, and kept my voice even. I truly appreciate Brenda's performance, the charts, the binder, the courtroom cosplay. It's truly impressive, but there are a few problems. I pulled a thin folder from under my arm. First, here are photographs of my yard, taken daily for the last 2 weeks. No food, no trash, no attractant. Second, here are screenshots of Brenda's own posts, bragging about demolishing my fence and leaving her koi pond uncovered. Third, here's a copy of the county's official warning to her for attracting wildlife. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I wasn't done. And finally, I said, pulling out my phone, here's audio from the day Brenda ordered workers to trespass and chop down my trees. I hit play. Her voice filled the cul-de-sac. These need to come down too. The board agreed. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the cicadas seemed to fall silent. Then, someone in the back muttered, "This is insane." Another whispered, "She's abusing her position." Stacy, pale as chalk, stood up and quietly excused herself. Brenda's face was crimson. "This is out of order," she shrieked. "You have no right to record me." I shrugged. Public property line. Perfectly legal. And besides, the HOA bylaws you love so much, they allow documentation in any dispute. Page 47, Section B. Her mouth opened, then closed. She hadn't expected anyone to actually read the bylaws she so readily weaponized. That's when Mike, yes, sandal-wearing, gossip-loving Mike, stood up. "Brenda, enough. You've dragged this neighborhood through weeks of chaos. We're tired of it. The bears aren't Ethan's fault. They're yours. We all know it." Murmurs of agreement rose. A few people even clapped. Brenda spun in circles, desperately trying to regain control, but the tide had irrevocably turned. For the first time, she wasn't the loudest voice. She was drowning under everyone else's. The hearing dissolved into utter chaos. Neighbors walked out. The men in polos packed up their table, muttering about not signing up for this. And Brenda, she stood frozen in her driveway, binder clutched to her chest, her empire crumbling around her. But she wasn't finished. That night, as if the universe itself sought to punctuate the spectacle, the bear returned, bigger, bolder, lumbering straight through her open lawn. This time, however, it didn't stop at the koi pond or the trash bin. It headed straight for her back porch, where she had stored several bags of bird seed. With a single swipe, it ripped the door off her storage bin and feasted. Brenda lost it. She ran into the street screaming, waving a flashlight like she was directing air traffic. Neighbors poured out of their houses, phones raised, recording. The bear ignored her until she got too close. Then, with a lazy swing, it knocked the flashlight from her hand. She screamed again, tripping over her own feet, and scrambled onto her lawn. Animal control arrived one last time, but their tone was starkly different now. "Ma'am," one officer said firmly, "this is your third incident. If you can't secure your property, we'll have to issue fines, real fines, and if it continues, relocating the bear won't matter. We'll consider relocating you." The crowd gasped. Brenda sputtered, demanding they fine me instead. But no one was listening. Even Stacy avoided her eyes. The next morning, the HOA Facebook page exploded. Neighbors posted videos of the chaos. Memes spread like wildfire. Brenda versus Bear, the trilogy. Someone even edited dramatic music over the clip of her falling in the grass. The comments weren't just mocking. They were furious. People wanted her gone. By noon, a petition had begun. "Remove Brenda as HOA president." Signatures piled up. By evening, more than half the neighborhood had signed. Mike himself slipped the petition under my door with a wide grin. "Thought you'd want the honors," he said. I read every name. Families who had once feared her. Retirees who had quietly paid her unjust fine. Even Stacy's shaky signature sat at the bottom. They weren't just tired of her. They were ready to end her tyrannical reign. That night, I sat on my porch again, watching the fireflies blink across the darkening yard. My dog dozed peacefully at my feet. Somewhere deep in the woods, I thought I heard a low rumble, the bear perhaps reclaiming its territory. I felt no fear, because the real predator in our neighborhood had just been cornered, and I knew the final strike was imminent. The petition to remove Brenda spread faster than crabgrass on an unwatered lawn.
By Monday morning, every neighbor with a functioning printer had a copy taped to their mailbox. Kids wrote Bears 3 Brenda 0 in chalk on the sidewalk. Someone even decorated her driveway with a hand-painted sign bearing the same score. She stormed out in her robe to tear it down. But by then, 3 people were live streaming. All she managed was to look like an unhinged street performer. I remained quiet. That's how you win wars against people like Brenda. Not by shouting louder, but by letting them collapse under the weight of their own absurdity. She'd been given enough rope, and she'd braided it into a crown, then proceeded to strangle herself with it. By Tuesday evening, the HOA board had no choice but to call an emergency vote. It was held in the community clubhouse, a bland beige building with carpet that smelled faintly of mildew. Brenda sat at the head table, binders stacked in front of her like a fortress shield, her hair shellacked into an unmoving helmet. Stacy sat beside her, avoiding eye contact, clearly wishing she were anywhere else on earth. The room was packed. Folding chairs lined every wall. Neighbors squeezed shoulder to shoulder, air thick with anticipation. Mike, surprisingly sober and serious for once, stood and read the petition aloud. His voice echoed, "We, the undersigned residents of Oak Ridge Estates, move to remove Brenda from her position as HOA president. Effective immediately." Brenda leaped up, slamming her palms on the table. "This is a coup," she shrieked. "You're all blind to his manipulation." She stabbed her finger toward me. "Ethan is the true danger. I didn't even flinch. I simply stood, lifted a neat stack of papers, and handed them to the board. Exhibits A through D, photos, videos, county citations, and recordings of her actions over the past month. The room buzzed as the board members leafed through the damning evidence. Every photo of her koi pond, every recording of her ordering trees cut, every county warning. It was all there, undeniable. A board member cleared his throat. "Brenda, this is substantial. Do you have a defense?" She sputtered, flipping her binder open and closed. A pathetic display. But the problem with lies is they crumble under the harsh light of truth. Her binder was a pile of bluster. Mine was concrete evidence. The vote wasn't even close. By a show of hands, the board unanimously removed her. The room erupted. Some cheered. Others clapped politely. A few simply sighed with profound relief. Brenda's face turned scarlet. She pointed at me again, shrieking, "You'll regret this. You think you've won, but the law is on my side." Then she stormed out, binder clutched to her chest like a life raft. I thought that would be the absolute end of it, but Brenda wasn't wired for surrender. The very next morning, I woke to find a thick envelope shoved under my door. Inside, a lawsuit. Brenda was suing me personally for emotional distress, property devaluation, and reckless endangerment. The astronomical figure she claimed, $200,000. I laughed so hard I spilled coffee down my shirt. She had no fence, no allies, no credibility, but she truly believed a lawsuit would scare me. I sent it to my lawyer. He called me 5 minutes later, chuckling. "Ethan, this is the weakest case I've ever seen. Honestly, I should frame it. Still, court is court." And Brenda adored an audience. When the date arrived, she showed up in a power suit, 2 sizes too small, binder in hand, lips pursed as if she'd just sucked a lemon. She strutted into the courtroom as though it were her personal kingdom. The judge, however, was distinctly unimpressed. My lawyer methodically presented the evidence: photos, county warnings, recordings, petitions. Brenda interrupted repeatedly, waving her binder and shouting lies, fabrications, until the judge snapped, "Ma'am, one more outburst, and I'll hold you in contempt." The knockout punch came when my lawyer played the audio of her ordering the workers to cut down my trees. The courtroom went dead silent. The judge leaned forward, eyebrows raised. "Miss Brenda, that's your voice, correct?" Her face crumpled. "That's taken out of context." The judge didn't buy it for a second. Within 20 minutes the case was dismissed. Not only that, the judge ordered Brenda to reimburse me for all my legal fees and damages. The total, just shy of $30,000. The look on her face, as the gavel came down was the closest thing to poetry I've ever witnessed. News traveled fast. By that evening, the neighborhood group chat was ablaze with the story. Brenda sued Ethan and lost big time. Karma at last. Memes flooded in. Brenda photoshopped in boxing gloves. Utterly KO'd by a cartoon bear. You'd think humiliation, debt and removal from power would have been enough. But Brenda had one last desperate trick. Late that night she tried to sneak back into her old role. She plastered flyers on every mailbox. Emergency HOA reinstatement meeting. Brenda's still in charge. She even printed fake letterhead to make it look official. But neighbors had had enough. Not only did no one show up, someone filmed her sitting alone in a circle of folding chairs, binder in her lap, ranting to absolutely no one. The video went viral locally, captioned, "Dictator without a country." That was her true breaking point. A week later, a moving truck pulled up to her house. She didn't say goodbye, didn't make eye contact, just loaded her binder boxes and koi pond supplies into the back and drove away. The neighborhood exhaled collectively. Kids played outside again. Mike even mowed his lawn without being fined for grass height discrepancy. For the first time in months, Oak Ridge Estates felt like a community, not a prison camp. And me, I rebuilt my fence. Taller this time, reinforced cedar gleaming proudly in the sun. Neighbors stopped by to compliment it, to thank me for standing up, to joke about charging admission to the bear-proof fortress. But the real kicker came 2 weeks later. I was sipping beer on my porch when the bear appeared again, lumbering out of the woods. It paused at the property line where my new fence stood, sniffed the air, then turned, not towards me, not towards the neighbors, but towards Brenda's now empty house. It padded across the abandoned lawn, sniffed at the coilless pond, then lumbered lazily away. I laughed quietly, raising my beer in a mock toast. Brenda had wanted open yards. She got them, and the wilderness had answered. I didn't win because I shouted louder. I won because I played the long game, stayed calm, and let Brenda implode under the crushing weight of her own entitlement. The bear was merely the punctuation mark. And if you ever hear someone say, HOAs are about community harmony, feel free to tell them about the time one woman demolished my fence, declared war and ended up losing everything, while a bear walked straight into her yard to close the chapter on her reign.